The following podcast contains mature language and discussions that are not suitable for younger audiences. The opinions voiced in this podcast are our own. We are not experts on the topic we present, but have conducted our own research. Listener discretion is advised. On a cold night along the Klondike Highway in the Yukon Territory of Canada, something strange was spotted hovering in the sky. What people witnessed that night puzzles them to this day, but many are certain it was a UFO. To researchers, this case remains one of the most significant and mysterious UFO sightings in Canadian history. The reason for its significance was that it involved a large number of credible witnesses made up of civilians, local authorities, and even law enforcement. Most importantly, they all reported seeing the same thing: strange lights and a massive object moving in the sky. In this episode, we're going to examine the events that took place on the night of December 11th, 1996, the witnesses involved, the theories for what people saw, and the fact that the government gave no explanation for the event. Welcome to the Strange and Undecided podcast. Welcome back to the Strange and Undecided podcast. I'm your host and creator, Jarrett, joined by my co-hosts.
This is your co-pilot, Patrick speaking.
And Brando.
All right, so this week we're bringing you a UFO episode. This will be Brando's first one. Pat, you've done a bunch of these, and these, if I'm not mistaken, are your favorite.
I'm a veteran UFO podcaster at this point.
So have either of you heard about this case before, coming from Northern Canada in the Yukon?
I have not.
Not much comes out of Northern Canada, so this may be one of the more interesting cases that we hear from there.
Do you guys not remember what happened in February of 2023 at all in the Yukon?
No, I never heard of that.
What happened?
Really? Well, the Canadian government shot down what people thought was a UFO flying in the Yukon. Basically, there was nothing that was said about it besides, it was a weather balloon. It was a spy balloon, something like that. But really not much was said about it.
You know where else we've heard of weather balloons? Crash of Roswell. So Brando, have you consumed any UFO content to prepare for this episode?
I have watched a little bit of a series on UFOs, so we'll see if it comes in handy or not.
So let me get your thoughts before we begin. Are you a believer, a skeptic, or you just don't really care?
It's such a big universe out there. Like there has to be something. I don't know. I've never seen anything, but I really wish I had. And I don't know. I'd say I believe.
All right. With that being said, let's begin tonight's episode. Located in northern Canada is the remote and sparsely populated Yukon Territory. It is known for its stunning landscapes consisting of vast stretches of wilderness. Due to the remoteness of the Yukon, the skies above are quite clear due to a low level of light pollution. In 1996, the Yukon was home to a small population mostly concentrated in the territorial capital, Whitehorse, and several other towns and villages. However, this remoteness also means that when something strange is witnessed, these events are often only seen by a single person, and there isn't any technology to track such an event. Despite this, the Yukon is no stranger to UFO sightings, as there have been several over the years, but some hold more weight than others. On December 11th, 1996, along the Klondike Highway, two cousins were driving in separate vehicles from Whitehorse, the capital of the Yukon Territory, to Carmacks, which is about 177 kilometers away. They were traveling northbound and were coming up to an area known as Fox Lake, which was on the west side of the highway. For reference, Fox Lake is located approximately 80 kilometers north of Whitehorse. Both cousins saw what appeared to be rows of lights in the sky above the lake in the distance and kept an eye on them as they drove along the highway. As they got closer, they realized that the lights belonged to something larger. They had stopped to get a better look at the object and eventually lost sight of it and then continued down the highway. They kept driving and eventually saw the object hovering over Fox Lake again. They both stopped their cars. However, the cousin in the second vehicle stopped his car much further back as they were scared of what they were witnessing. The cousin in the lead car was much closer to the object and got out to take a better look. They both realized quickly that this massive object was a UFO. It slowly moved closer to the cousin in the first car and positioned itself almost directly above him on the highway. He was now looking at the underside of the object. He described it as being the size of a football stadium. It was featureless on the bottom but had a large, bright light in the center. The cousin in the second car was far enough away that he could see the general dome shape of the object in the sky. He remembered that he had a camera in his bag in his car and pulled it out to photograph what he was seeing. Unfortunately, he was unable to capture a picture of the object. He did, however, note that the time this occurred was 8:30 p.m. This will be important for later. After several minutes of the object hovering over the cousin in the first car, it moved away and disappeared over a hill to the east. At the same time, a couple with their baby were driving down the same stretch of highway around the southern end of Fox Lake, where they also witnessed the strange lights in the sky. They thought that it may have been a plane, but it was moving too slowly. It took them a bit of time trying to figure out what it was, and they finally concluded that they were witnessing a UFO. They continued on their drive and eventually came up to the Fox Lake campground and passed a couple cars pulled over with two people outside looking up at the sky. The couple pulled their car over to talk to them, and these two people were the cousins. They chatted about what they saw before continuing their drive, both completely puzzled by what it was they saw. In due time, they would come to find out that they weren't the only ones to see this. Many more did as well.
Did you say the size of a football field?
I did.
I was actually listening to another UFO podcast this week, and the guy was describing a UFO the size of a Walmart. So clearly there's these things out there.
Yeah, that's kind of an odd unit of measurement.
Brando, as a football connoisseur, give me your reaction to this.
What I'm picturing in my head right now is a plane landing in a football stadium. So of course it couldn't have been a plane. That's massive.
So for starters, the events of December 11th, 1996 occurred at 8:30 p.m. according to the cousins. However, this wasn't even the earliest sighting of something strange in the sky in the Whitehorse area. The initial reports started around 7 p.m. when several people in the area noticed bright lights in the sky. These lights were described as pulsating, flashing, and moving erratically. The lights were visible for several minutes before disappearing. While some of the witnesses only saw lights, others described seeing a large, silent object in the sky that looked like a triangle or a disc-shaped craft. Some people speculated that the object was hovering or slowly maneuvering, while others described it as a high-speed object moving in ways that defied conventional flight patterns. Interestingly enough, on the Klondike Highway, there's a place called Braeburn Lodge, which is about 34 kilometers north of Fox Lake. The owner of the lodge, Steve Watson, recalled a number of different people coming in saying they had witnessed something strange in the sky over Fox Lake. The first story came from one person who was driving along Fox Lake and had noticed lights in the distance in the sky that shouldn't be there. He initially brushed it off, but as he drove closer, he could tell that the lights were illuminating an object with a long, smooth, curved surface. Some traffic passed by him heading in the opposite direction. When he looked back after his eyes readjusted to the darkness, the object had disappeared from the spot he had previously seen it in. He scanned the horizon and was eventually able to spot a row of rectangular lights traveling over a hill to the east before losing sight of it again. He continued his drive and eventually pulled into Braeburn Lodge, where he gave Steve a description of what he saw and also made drawings for him. The reports I found indicated that many people would go on to make drawings of what they saw, and I'll post what I could find in the show notes. Additionally, the cousins had later pulled into Braeburn Lodge and gave their description to Steve, followed by the couple with their baby. In total, there were 6 sightings around Fox Lake, but it wasn't isolated to this area. The village of Carmacks, located 108 kilometers north of Fox Lake, and the village of Pelly Crossing, located an additional 106 kilometers north, also reported seeing rows of lights and an enormous unknown object slowly moving through the sky. I could get into the stories about these specific cases as well, but I feel like it would just be a lot of the same thing I'd be saying over and over again. So if you are interested, I will post the links to the stories individually in the show notes. The local authorities, which included the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, received an alarming amount of calls about strange lights in the sky. The witnesses, many of whom were deemed reliable and familiar with the area, insisted that what they had seen in the sky couldn't have been a man-made aircraft, special type of weather phenomena, or a natural occurrence. It had to be something unknown. The RCMP sent out officers to investigate the reports, but by then the UFO had left the area. However, some RCMP officers were able to report seeing strange lights in the sky themselves. One officer described observing a cluster of bright lights that appeared to be stationary for several minutes before disappearing from view. Ultimately, during the initial investigation, the RCMP were not able to explain what the lights in the sky belonged to. This incident would have likely remained a series of odd reports had it not been for the fact that the event occurred in the vicinity of military activity. After the sighting, the witnesses contacted the authorities to report what they had seen. This led to an official investigation by Canadian military personnel who were concerned about the possibility that the object could have been a foreign aircraft or some kind of surveillance craft. Despite the military's involvement in this case and their investigation, the official reports on the incident were limited and vague. It became clear that there were details of the event that the military and government were not willing to make public.
The whole part there about it possibly being like a different aircraft, like what was it?
Like a surveillance craft?
Surveillance, thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Wouldn't the whole point of that be to be private and not like swooping down at cars and like all these people seeing it?
Yeah, you'd think so.
It's the government. They want to be like behind the scenes and everything, and nobody sees what they're doing. And
yeah, it's not a very effective surveillance craft if everybody sees it.
And what aircraft is that large?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think the government has our best interest in not disclosing this information?
I'd like to say yes, and I would hope that the answer is yes.
It's almost like they don't trust us with the truth.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Or they don't know the truth and they don't want to tell part of the story without knowing the whole truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's the type of thing. It's like, why alarm us if they don't have to? And if you don't have all the information to back it up with, then why tell us?
Maybe they're alarmed too, and they do have our best interest not to alarm us.
For sure. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Yukon UFO incident is the consistency of what the witnesses saw. The descriptions of the lights and the object were remarkably similar from person to person. However, it is important to note that variations existed in the specifics of the shapes and the speed of movements, which I touched on a little bit earlier. For example, one witness from Whitehorse described seeing a number of lights oriented in a triangular formation. Another witness driving a truck on the highway reported seeing a bright light hovering over the mountains. This light was described as large and pulsating. In summary, the majority of people witnessed a similar sighting, which was a series of lights belonging to a massive object seen in the sky that night. 3 years after the incident, engineer Martin Jacek began investigating the case for UFO BC, or UFO British Columbia. According to the book, The Canadian UFO Report, The Best Cases Revealed by Jeff Dittman and Chris Rutkowski, Martin identified a total of 31 witnesses and conducted interviews with 22 of them. We've also heard of Chris Rutkowski before and have mentioned him in our other UFO episodes, particularly in episode 9 on the Shag Harbor incident. Martin analyzed all of the accounts and was able to determine the size of the object and estimated it to be around 880 meters in diameter.
What?
That's bigger than a football stadium.
That's way bigger than a football stadium.
In his formal report, Martin had considered and dismissed plausible explanations, which included hoaxes, aurora borealis, military aircraft, and meteors. The most plausible explanation was that a Russian space probe that was launched on December 11th had been what people witnessed. However, Martin ruled it out because the probe wouldn't have been visible as far east as the Yukon. Also, due to the object's massive size by the witness accounts, this made it impossible for it to be a space probe, as they are significantly smaller. With no alternatives making sense, the only option that did make sense was that it was a UFO. That is, an enormous craft not of this earth had flown low over the witnesses, who unanimously agreed on what they had seen. Most of them, in fact, believed that it was a UFO. As with many UFO sightings, there are always a vast array of potential explanations that are pitched forward. The theories I was able to find in my research are as follows. Number 1, military exercises or secret aircraft. One of the most commonly suggested explanations for UFO sightings is the possibility of secret military aircraft or exercises. The Yukon region has been used by both Canadian and United States military forces for training and testing purposes, and the remote location offers a perfect environment for experimental aircraft or testing different weapon systems. Some UFO researchers speculate that the lights seen over the Yukon could have been the result of experimental aircraft, possibly stealth planes or military drones, which would explain the unusual movements and lack of noise. Additionally, flares or other military ordnance could be the culprit for the pulsating or flashing lights observed by witnesses. Flares are often dropped from aircraft during military exercises and can create the illusion of an erratic, unearthly light in the sky. Number 2, atmospheric phenomena. Another explanation put forward is that the lights were the result of something in the atmosphere, such as the northern lights, also known as the aurora borealis. The Yukon is located within what is called the auroral zone, an area where the northern lights are regularly visible. The northern lights are caused by charged particles from the sun interacting with the Earth's magnetic field. Some researchers have suggested that the lights seen on December 11, 1996 may have been a rare or intense northern lights display. However, the witness descriptions of the lights did not match the typical characteristics of the northern lights. While it can appear as swirling lights in the sky, they usually move in a predictable manner and are not known to pulse or flash erratically. Number 3, meteorites or other space debris. Another possible explanation, which kind of branches off the last one, is the presence of meteorites or space debris entering the Earth's atmosphere. When these objects burn up on re-entry, they can produce bright flashes of light and illumination. While this theory may account for some of the lights observed, it does not account for the object observed by so many witnesses. Two skeptics named Robert Schaefer and James Oberg wanted to take a better look at the Russian space probe theory. They got in contact with Ted Mulscan, who is a Canadian expert on satellite orbits and re-entries. When asked about the Russian space probe, he told Robert and James that the second stage booster from Cosmos 2335 re-entered the atmosphere at approximately 8:30 p.m. on December 11th, the same time that many people witnessed the lights in the sky. Ted continued by saying the debris from the boosters would have been visible in the northern sky to people on the ground in the Yukon. Instead of a UFO, people were simply witnessing debris sparkling and flashing as it traveled from west to east in the upper atmosphere. Timing-wise, this would have lasted several minutes as well. The illumination of the debris may have caused the stars to be darkened and gave the impression of a dark object in the sky. Number 4, extraterrestrials. The most sensational explanation is that the row of lights and witnessing a massive object travel across the sky that night were of extraterrestrial origin, which many people truly believe. UFO researchers have long argued that sightings like this one, where so many people saw the same thing and it ends up being unexplained by conventional means, could be evidence of something otherworldly. Maybe this could have been an advanced spacecraft from another planet or even another dimension. UFO researchers have pointed to the fact that the witnesses describe such behaviors that are often associated with UFO sightings. This includes rapid acceleration, sudden changes in direction, and pulsating light patterns. This theory has been supported by the fact that many UFO sightings, including this one, have been investigated and no reasonable explanation has ever been given. One of the most confusing aspects of the Yukon incident would be the military's involvement in their attempts to downplay and even suppress information related to this particular event. After the initial report of the incident was filed, military personnel were dispatched to investigate. Canada's Department of National Defence took the incident seriously enough to allocate resources to uncover the identity of the object. However, the results of their investigation remain classified, and there has been no official explanation given to the public regarding what happened that night. The military's lack of an explanation for the event has fueled the idea that the government may be hiding something, with many believing that the government was withholding crucial details about the true cause of the lights and the object in the sky. Some UFO researchers claim that this is part of a larger government cover-up to conceal knowledge of UFOs or advanced technologies. It is also important to note that the RCMP's involvement in investigating the sightings didn't provide any answers, only more questions. The RCMP or other police forces are typically quick to offer explanations for events such as these. The fact that they too were unable to provide an explanation left many witnesses and UFO researchers thinking that the only logical explanation was that it was something not of this earth. This case is significant for a number of reasons. Not just because so many people witnessed the same thing, or even the event as a whole, but because it gives a slight glimpse into a potentially larger issue. That is UFO disclosure and the role of the government in all UFO cases. During the 1990s, UFO sightings were becoming more frequent and public interest in these cases was growing. The Yukon incident and the resulting lack of an explanation makes you wonder about the extent to which the government may be withholding information about these encounters. When there is no explanation provided, people will immediately be suspicious and think that the military and/or government are deliberately concealing the true explanation of the event. There are those who call upon the government to be more transparent with such events and let the public know what's going on. We have seen this more recently in the United States, where information has come out regarding various government programs dedicated to UFO research, as well as footage and documentation about these unknown objects. Martin Jacek, after his personal investigation, called upon the government of Canada to initiate an inquiry into the event to end the speculation and confusion surrounding it. In Rutkowski and Dittman's book, they pointed out the fact that Martin tried to get the government to take action and figure out what exactly happened. Along with this, he encouraged proper scientific study of the phenomena, sharing the results with the public, and giving funding to universities and colleges to research the topic. As expected, there has been no official response to his requests, and the government remains silent on the matter. But not everything from the government was silent. In 2022, the Royal Canadian Mint released a commemorative coin for the Yukon encounter, which, like the other ones, glows under certain light conditions like black light. 7,500 of these coins were made, and as for all the other coins in this series, they sold out extremely fast. This one was priced at $139.95 Canadian. Although the mystery of the Yukon UFO incident was not solved, it made its mark on the region. Some individuals who had previously been skeptical of the UFO reports were left questioning their beliefs, while others continued to hold firm in their convictions that they had witnessed something otherworldly. Whether the truth behind the Yukon incident will ever be revealed remains uncertain, but its place in UFO history is secure. As new sightings continue to be reported from all over the world, the Yukon UFO incident serves as a reminder of the many questions that still surround these kinds of events, and the fact that there is so much we don't know. All right, so that's the case of the Yukon UFO incident. What do you guys think?
Well, I said at the beginning, I just can't imagine something being that big. Like I've been on an airplane and I'm trying to imagine like an airplane the size of a football field. And it's like I automatically go to like Death Star vibes. Like it's just huge.
Yukoners know what big is. They're surrounded by like majestic features. So seeing a UFO, that takes their breath away. If it's that big, that's kind of crazy.
Well, and them about seeing lights in the sky, they literally get to see northern lights all the time. It's completely different from that.
For sure. So out of the theories that I presented to both of you, which one stood out the most to you in particular, Brando?
Well, I got two things to say on that. What I'm hoping it was, I'm really hoping it was extraterrestrial. The only other thing that you mentioned that it very well could be were the secret mission from the government, if they were launching stuff, whatever, testing things out, and they want to cover it up. They don't want us to know. That was the only other theory I thought could be possible, but I'm really hoping it wasn't.
Pat, what do you think?
I don't think it was a natural phenomena. I don't think it was the government. And I don't think it's extraterrestrials.
So none of the above.
Where does that leave us? I don't know, but I don't think any of those theories are what it actually is. I think there's a greater, deeper, some kind of mystery. Maybe it'll be solved one day, maybe not, but it's clearly something quite out of the ordinary. Jared, what about you? What do you think?
Ooh, to me, I think it's probably advanced aircraft developed by the military. It would also explain why the military gave zero explanation and made it incredibly vague, because they're not going to disclose to the public secret programs that they're working on, which could get into, or whoever Canada and the US consider their enemies. As far as I know, the military is just going to keep this as secretive as possible for as long as possible and ensure the public does not know, because what's the use in like a stealth program, for example, if everybody knows about it? It's kind of rendered useless at that point. So I'm between that one, and I'm also kind of between the theory that the space probe broke up and they were just seeing different parts of it in the upper atmosphere. However, that one definitely comes second for me because it does not account, like Pat mentioned earlier, for the erratic movement, the stopping over the highway, being in such close proximity to certain people.
It's funny you mention a possible secretive program. It's like, hey, let's just make this the size of a football stadium. Make sure nobody sees this thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's also a good point.
If it's like very early technology, maybe they had to make it that size. Kind of like how our first computers were the size of a room. And now we can fit like all the computing power in those early systems in like a tiny microchip.
Right. And it could be like a secretive program, but not something that they necessarily want to be stealthy. It could also be like a psychological test on how people would react to a certain situation. Like they wanted to see what the public response would be in such a sparsely populated area.
That's a good point.
Now you're really thinking outside the box, because that's a really interesting point. It's like a field test, right?
Yeah. We already know for a fact that the Canadian and US military perform military operations and testing over the Yukon and Alaska as well. What's to say this wasn't just another test? I will ask you guys, though, I sent you both a video today. I think that was the Tesla space rocket breaking up and something happening and the streaks flying across the sky. To me, that seems very reminiscent of what people saw here and also what the Cosmos 2335 secondary rocket flying through the sky was described as. So do you think there's any possibility that it could just be the debris falling for at least some of the witnesses?
I mean, when you brought up the time of like the 8:30 time and you said like the time that it was launched, it could be. Like when you sent that video, yeah, like the streams of the debris and the lights, it could very well have been that.
Although that is very cool and kind of majestic and also kind of pretty, if I'm honest. That could explain some of the sightings with some strange lights in the sky, but definitely not like a kilometer-long solid object that people are describing here.
Yeah, to me, the light phenomena portion of what people saw could definitely be explained by like the aircraft breaking up or the rocket booster breaking up in the upper atmosphere. But it does not account for people seeing slow moving objects hovering like right above them with a smooth, shiny surface and bright lights above them, like the cousin on the highway, seeing it directly above him, hovering there and then slowly moving off. You can't say that that was space debris.
The space debris is just traveling in a linear path. It's not changing direction or nothing like that.
Exactly.
So, guys, I've got a question for you. So, assuming that these are aliens, they're real, why are they coming to Earth?
Well, I'd be inclined to think that they're coming here to observe us in some capacity because there hasn't been any official interaction between us and them, per se. It's purely from a observation standpoint where they don't really want to interact with us just yet.
Yeah, it could be like their version of like our scientists, I don't know, going to the Arctic and looking at a colony of penguins. Have you ever seen like they make like robot penguins just so they can get closer to them?
Yeah, I've seen different things, not penguins specifically, but I've seen like robotic like ducks and stuff like that and different animals that they kind of implant into a colony to see how they're going to react to it.
Right. But also maybe it's like just like our scientists observing like a colony of bees or an anthill or something. Even though we're not disguised, we're just curious about how they operate. So I got a theory. What if these UFO things are not alien craft? They're not like machines. Maybe they're like biological. Maybe there's some sort of like organism that's developed more than we have on this planet. It's from this planet, but they're more highly developed. So, for example, like an octopus or like a chameleon, they've developed camouflage to blend into their surroundings. What if these UFO craft, whatever they are, their camouflage is blending into a blue sky, and that's why we can't see them?
Yeah, I guess the question I would ask at that point would be where's evidence of the ones who have died? Like there's no carcasses. So like a whale, for example, or like deep sea fish, for example, when they die, sometimes they wash up on shore and it looks very alien when you see those things. You're like, oh my God, what the hell is this thing? I've never seen this before. I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever. There's no evidence of these biological aliens that or craft or whatever washing up on a shore, for example.
That's a good point. But what if they were so evolved that they maybe don't die? What if they're like eternal? They found like the fountain of youth or something.
That is one heck of a discussion after that.
That's a whole other episode.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think we've just uncovered a big rabbit hole here that no one's ever talked about.
Well, I think going off what I was saying about like the deep sea fish and stuff like that, so there's a very, very small portion of the ocean that we have actually explored. What's to say that they're not using that as their kind of base of operations or where they actually live?
Maybe that's where they go to die. Maybe they know they're gonna die and they just go down to the deepest part of the oceans where we haven't explored.
This is why I'm loving this discussion right now, because I have not looked up much on UFOs. I love just listening you two go back and forth on it because nobody knows the right answer, right? It's just endless possibilities, and I love every second of it.
So I do have trivia for the two of you. So as promised, each episode, I will be asking you guys a series of questions, and the points will be adding up to the end of the season, and the winner will be announced then. So as of right now, it is 0-0 because you guys tied last episode. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, our first question. Which province has the highest number of UFO reports to date? Is it A, Ontario, B, British Columbia, C, Alberta, or D, Yukon?
I feel like it's got to be one of the more populous provinces. So not Yukon. I feel like British Columbia's got some shit going on. Got a lot of people out on mushrooms there, so they're definitely seeing stuff. I'm gonna go with BC.
None of these really popped out to me, but the one that I was sort of warming up to was British Columbia. But I'm going to go with Alberta.
You're both wrong. The correct answer is Ontario.
Ontario is more populous than BC. I should have said Ontario.
Ontario has the most reported UFO sightings in Canada with 2,539 recorded incidents. All right, question number 2. Which province built a UFO landing pad and a UFO tourist center? Is it A, Quebec, B, Alberta, C, British Columbia, or D, Ontario?
I'm gonna go with BC again. This sounds like a BC thing. Ontario's too business.
We also live in Ontario. I thought we would have learned about this, but heck, I'm not going with Alberta. I'm going with Ontario.
The correct answer is B, Alberta. In 1967, St. Paul, Alberta built a UFO landing pad as part of the centennial celebrations. The town also opened a UFO tourist information center in the 90s. All right, our final question. What year did the Canadian government begin to collect information and document UFO sightings? Is it A, 1966, B, 1955, C, 1947, or D, 1938?
I'm gonna say 1955 because I feel like that's in the era of the Cold War, and we had a lot of NORAD operations up here. So I feel like we were trying to track what was in the sky at that time.
I'm going with 1947 because it's a guess.
Well, it's a good guess because you got it right. It is 1947. In a memo written by the Department of National Defense, information about UFOs began to be collected in 1947. However, the government acknowledges that UFO sightings go back to the turn of the century. All right, so Brando is now up to 1 point, and Pat, you are still at 0.
Guys, I got one big question for you. Have you guys ever had like a UFO sighting experience? Because I'm very jealous and I've never had one. So,
Yes, I have. Jarrett?
I have as well.
well, now I have to hear these stories because I've known you guys for a very long time and I've never heard these.
All right, let me go first. So, flashback. This is probably 15 to 20 years ago. This is at nighttime. I'm at my cousin's house. We're swimming in the pool. And then out of nowhere comes this glowing orange spherical object coming off the horizon over top of the houses. And it kind of goes from one horizon across the sky to the next, just out of sight, slowly for about 5 minutes. We're looking at this thing. And I'd say, you know, when the full moon is really close to the ground and it looks really big, I'd say it was about the size of that. It was completely silent, and it wasn't like it was emitting light, not like a plain light. It wasn't flashing or nothing like that. It wasn't like a star where you can see the radiance of it. It was just like a dim glow. And yeah, completely silent. It wasn't a plane. Drones weren't invented yet at this point, at least not that we know of. And I even tried the next day to check online to see if there was anything strange in the newspapers that people reported or anything like that over the sky in our town, and I couldn't find anything. So it remains a mystery. I don't know if it was aliens but it was a UFO. That's what it was.
So for my story, this happened actually pretty recently, only a couple of years ago. So I was out on my balcony and I was just looking out because I was on the 9th floor. And I happened to look up at some of the stars because it was a really, really clear night. And naturally, you'll sometimes see airplanes flying overhead. So you see their blinking lights. So I saw 2 and they were heading not directly towards each other, but at some point their paths would cross. And I just thought to myself, that'd be kind of odd if they reached kind of the intersection point of their flights at the exact same time. And as they got closer, I started to realize, oh, they're definitely going to, but there's no way anything could happen because I'm not going to be somebody to observe something like that. So I kept watching, and the next thing I noticed is all of a sudden, the two different lights from these airplanes suddenly just shot one right in front of the other. They changed flight patterns entirely and all of a sudden shot over the top of my apartment building at like 100 times the speed they were moving before. I have absolutely no explanation for what that was, but the movement was, I would call, quite erratic, and then it changed speeds so drastically.
Those are two like awesome stories. And now every single night when I go to let the dogs out, I'm going to be looking up in the sky and hopefully I'll have a story to tell you guys.
Brando's gonna get abducted tonight.
I hope not.
If it is, at least I won trivia.
All right, so that's going to end the episode for tonight. If you have any ideas or want your story featured on the show, please email us at strangeandundecided@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening.
And
Good night.